Hello everyone again. We're back now. It's the 24th of November, and welcome to the NYIOP webinar with Lenore Rosenberg. I have to tell you that in my experience, Lenore is one of the most knowledgeable people in our industry, but beyond that, she's one of the most honest and realistic. This is one of the things that I've loved the most about dealing with Lenore. Her background is you were a singer, and then you joined the Met, and you have done many different things at the Met. Currently, you're in the position you cast all of the secondary roles and covers at the Met currently. Historically, you have been, as we were just talking about, you've been James Levine's assistant. And when you first came in there, secretary, you said, and you have also run the Met Young Artist Program for a number of years, historically there. Tell us a little bit about your background at the Met and other things that you have done while you've been there.
Well, when I started at the Met, I had already done administrative jobs in Memphis and Cincinnati, and one season back when Carol Fox was still alive in Chicago. For the first 2 years that I was at the Met in the artistic department, but already not Levine's secretary, there was a wonderful man who did the cover casting and the small roles named Larry Stayer. And I learned a great deal from him about how one goes about knowing the requirements of a role at the Met. And I of course and attended a lot of performances, and slowly but surely it started to sink in.
Which is something actually I do want to talk about as we're going forward, is the specific thing, because many times when you've attended the auditions we've done and you and I have spoken, there is a very big difference between a role at the Met and a role in general. Very specific needs for that. And I've been very fascinated, I have to say, at many of the times that you've heard someone that I remember specifically, as an aside to that, specifically one time when we heard a singer who was extremely good up to a certain note, but really not particularly good above that certain note, to be honest. I don't even remember his name, so I can't possibly say it. And it was fascinating because this was somebody that you said, for certain things, this is exactly what I need. Because for certain small roles, the voice is of magnificent quality and present and particularly loud up to a certain point. And that's useful. Now, what I want to jump into, because you and I have had these conversations, and as we talked about before, what is the hottest, biggest problem of opera singing professionally today? What is lacking the most, in your opinion, to dive in?
Well, what is lacking the most is breath support, without which you cannot have great singing. What we have today are a lot of people who are being trained as musicians, particularly in the States. They're very good musicians. They can count. They can sing in all different languages. But can they sing a supported, free, in-tune, long note? Not so many. Whereas back in the 50s and 60s, we had more of those and fewer people who could do, at that time, or Peter Grimes or whatever was considered new. Now it's the opposite. So what used to be the standard repertoire, the Verdi, the Puccini, the big French stuff, is becoming harder and harder to cast.
And you don't think that is because we don't have Verdi voices? You think that's because nobody's training people to be able to sing the music?
Yeah, I'm sure the same percentage of people are being born with the capability. In fact, I hear great voices a lot. What I don't hear a lot is great singing, because they just don't know how. Now, they either didn't get the right information, or actively got the wrong information, or they're trying to shortcut in such a way that they're skipping over what need to be a certain number of years of simply learning how to do it. You can't just go from the crook of the piano in your teacher's studio to the Met stage and sing, Kanye or something like that. It's important to take all the steps.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the solution, or is there, obviously there's no quick fix, but what is the solution to that, and what are the barriers in the business these days that's stopping people from pursuing that solution?
I wish I knew the solution, and my colleagues and I talk about this ad infinitum. I don't know where along the way the very basics of teaching classical singing became so hard to find. Breath support is not an option. It's necessary. And yet I talk to a lot of young singers and ask them what their teacher says about breath support, and they say, oh, we never talk about it. Or they'll say, oh, yes, she says I should take a nice, relaxed breath. Yes.
So what do you do with it? Yes. What do you do with that nice, relaxed breath
now,
in all of your free time?
What I think is happening, both as a consequence of fewer Tibaldis and Corellis, and as a consequence of the fact that the intendants and stage directors have determined new priorities for casting, we are at the very least casting lighter voices than we used to in certain roles. Some of those people sing well, but they shouldn't be singing those roles. And then, of course, they don't last as long. So I don't know how to fix it.
But do you think that, so this question, because I heard many times when I was a singer, and I've heard many times through what I've done for the past 10 years, that, for example, in America, in bigger houses, they cast things one Fach heavier. For example, a Fiordiligi in the United States would actually be a Brunhilde somewhere in Germany. That's an exaggeration, but do you find that that is the case?
Well, yes. I mean, at the NYIOP auditions, as you and I have discussed, a girl will come in and sing Fiordiligi, and the representatives from the small German houses then want to hear Die Teure Halle, and I want to hear, Dove Sono.
Yeah.
It's a completely different expectation, which is allied to wanting thinner, younger bodies. Now, there are some large people with small voices. That's not, it isn't true that every heavyset person will sing well. But if it's more important that the Countess be slim than sing like Margaret Price, then it's harder to find somebody who is both attractive according to the new standards and sings just as well. It isn't impossible, but it's rare.
I mean, I can say from experience that in Europe that is a very, very strong trend. It has been for a number of years. Do you find that in the United States in general that's becoming much more of a trend, is casting body types first and voices second?
Yes, and I think the Met was one of the last holdouts. So we are
True.
only now beginning to do what they've been doing in Europe for many years and what they've been doing in regional houses here for some number of years.
Mm-hmm. So then, a question here. Let's go back. Let's dive in a little bit this way, and then we'll get over to some of the questions that are coming in. You talked about singing at the Met. It's a very specific thing. What are those specific things that make the Met different than any other theater?
Well, obviously the size. We have 3,800 seats and 200 standing. It's a good acoustic. It's always been a better acoustic than at Rest in Peace City Opera, which is almost the same size. Nonetheless, you have to have a certain amount of sound to be heard. You have to be heard over the orchestra.
Uh-huh.
Yes, simply volume. But that is so often a question of focus of the voice as opposed to roaring. A lot of people mistake the sound they hear in their head as loud for what we're getting out in front. But yes, volume is the first consideration, of course, for the Met, and more for certain roles than others. There is also a question of size of personality, which is a little harder to explain. But there are artists who make themselves big and fill the house, and there are artists who draw you in so that you are what they pay attention to, no matter what they're doing, how big what they're doing is. But you can't be bland. You can't be kind of a small personality. That will not work in that house.
And even when you're looking for, I don't know, the Flemish deputies, when you're looking for that, or you're looking for Marullo, these still come into play. The personality comes into play, not just the volume?
Well, for the Flemish deputies, no. they don't have personality because they have hats, so they don't need personality.
Exactly. Big hat or personality, one of the two.
But, Marullo has to run in, get the attention of the courtiers, look at the prompter, and sing, because he has the Gran Nuova. So, he doesn't have to have the personality of the Blanterone, but he can't just disappear either.
Very interesting. Now, so then, when casting these, another thing that maybe people don't know about, which I think would be interesting, is talk about covers at the Met. How many covers do you have for each role, and to what level down the casting list is everything covered at the Met?
Everything in every opera is covered, usually one cover. We might have a second cover if, for example, the first cover cannot arrive for rehearsals on time, or the schedule to perform is not going to arrive for rehearsals on time. But mostly we have one cover, but for everything. And I believe we may be the last house that does that.
And what does it entail? What does it entail to cover at the Met? What do you have to do? How does that work?
Well, you have to. It's just. I mean, you have to do the same thing that you would to sing at the Met. Usually, for covers of major roles, I look for someone who has done the role somewhere, or at least is an experienced singer, because being told at 6:45 that you're going to go on at 7:30, and the covers almost never have stage or orchestra rehearsal, takes a certain amount of experience and a certain presence of mind, and it's not for beginners. I remember.
And the Met will put a cover on? No, please, go ahead.
I remember Mignon Dunn saying that when she made her, overnight success after 25 years as Azucena, the big difference for her was that she actually got rehearsal. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So the Met will put a cover on.
Oh yes. Now, Peter Gell believes that the audience wants as exciting a performance as they can get, as they've paid for. And therefore, if there is someone in the theater who is not the nominal cover, who knows the role, but is considered more famous, but wouldn't sit and cover for 6 weeks, then he will put that person on. But certainly for the minor roles, we definitely put covers on. And for some of the major roles. It depends how much notice we get.
Just out of curiosity, do you remember a time when somebody was a cover that went on and somehow it became like a launch pad, other than the Domingo thing way back during the time you've been there?
Nothing like that.
Nothing like that. Ruben saying Angela Brown, or I guess
Latanya Moore did a beautiful jump-in debut. I mean, there have certainly been some very good performances, and we were very lucky to have those people. But in terms of the career launch, nothing like that. Nothing like the Domingo.
Nothing ever happened. Now, a question. Going back, I mean, I will ask this, and I don't know if it's something. I'm fascinated to know this as well because I have an opinion. My opinion is no is the answer. But do they mic people at the Met like everybody's been saying 25 years now?
No. The only people we mic are something like Yokana in the Cistern, or something where it's not a question of the singer being off stage. It needs to make a certain effect that the director and the conductor want. But no, we don't mic people.
No. And to go back quickly to what you were saying as far as the acoustic and the fact that it matters the focus rather than the pure volume, I have to say, I heard Kathy Battle several times, and that was possibly the smallest voice that I've ever heard in a throat, yet you could hear her in standing room and family circle because it was so well focused.
Yes, exactly.
Yet I remember when I was working for Delora and still in school, do you remember Nina Rautio, who sang a run of Aidas back in the day, who blew as wide and as loud a sound as you could imagine inside the rehearsal room, and you couldn't hear her on the stage. You simply couldn't hear it.
Well, there was a German bass some years ago named Hans Sotin, who was a beautiful singer. And I heard him in Bayreuth as Gurnemanz, and he sounded like a god. But when he got to the Met doing the Rheingold Wotan, which is a role he did a lot in Germany, the voice simply didn't have cut. It was too soft-grained to carry over the orchestra there.
Oh.
Whereas a singer like Jim Morris, obviously, part of what makes that voice so exciting is that it'll cut through anything. You can't not hear him. And
it's like Schubert. It's cutting through this massive orchestra, and it's like he's talking to you.
Yeah. I mean, Pavarotti, the acoustic of his face was so remarkable that no matter where he was on stage, or indeed off stage, and no matter where you are in the house, he always sounded like he was singing right there. There's just something about that voice. Stephanie Blythe has that too.
Absolutely.
Has to do with
absolutely.
Focus.
It's fascinating because I was lucky enough to hear Pavarotti, I think, 3 times. And indeed, the only other person that I have personally heard that has that same effect of it sounding like it's coming off the floor into your ear is Stephanie Blythe. It's so perfectly focused that it just hits every. And people said that Joan Sutherland had that as well, that it was all around you like a blanket when she sang, but I didn't hear. So a question that somebody asked here that I think will be very interesting is for singers these days where everybody has to be 22, and it used to be that the smaller roles were the way that you got your start, and that also there were a number of roles that you could take chances on singers that maybe were not babies, not young, so to speak, not, that were over 30 years old, and they got a chance to get an opportunity. What are the opportunities for artists like that now? Can you give opportunities to singers that are a little further along in their life if they present themselves and show you the sound that you need to hear?
Yes, absolutely. We need everything as opposed to a house that does 4 operas a year or 6 operas a year. We do so many shows and we have so many performances that at some point in the season I'm going to need everything. Sure, I give employment to singers of all ages and of many different qualities, by which I mean some people are better actors than singers, some people are better musicians than actors, some people have beautiful sounds but are overweight. I need all of them at some point. Then it's a question of whether or not it's something they want to do.
So how does the Met, so to speak? How does one?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
How does one break into the Met? Put in the Met.
Well, there are several ways. One is, of course, the National Council audition. Another is doing a performance somewhere else that somebody sees. But usually, even if we see the performance and say, yes, this person is wonderful, we still bring them in for a stage audition almost all the time because the Met is different. And sometimes it's if a sufficient amount of credentials and publicity and build up, then we bring the person in, as a major debut. But to break in on the level of what I think the people who are signing in would be interested in, the National Council and the auditions that we hold at least twice a month now as screening auditions are still completely possible ways to come in.
These are the List Hall auditions, the famous List Hall auditions. So those still take place.
I'm sorry, I would just want to say, I judge a lot of competitions, as you know, all over. And I might hear someone in a competition, and it may not be the winner, but it's someone that I think I can use for XYZ, then I will bring them in to List Hall and see what they can do with some other repertoire.
I have to say, this is not just a shameless NYIOP plug, but you are one of the very few people that I can openly say you have actually offered somebody a contract from the preliminary auditions of a NYIOP once in Vienna. I believe it was not an actual offer, but what it was is if you honestly, what it was is if you could fit this size dress or lose this much weight by this date, then I can offer you a cover. And that was from a preliminary audition. That was one aria in a preliminary audition even, because I remember the 20 minutes I got yelled at by the singer afterwards. And then I remember after the fact that I said, well, because of this, etc. Now,
the lady in Florence, she was like a Romanian or a Bulgarian or something. who sang Lady Macbeth.
I do.
Remember? So she now has a contract to cover that next season.
Which is brilliant. See, there you go. It's the truth. Tell all those naysayers.
But the
now,
thing is,
a question.
Go ahead.
No. Please. The thing is, and then we'll move on.
The thing is, I heard her sing. I was in the room. I saw her. I looked at her resume. I was able to do some research on her. She is not a beginner. And I feel confident that, should the circumstance arise, she could get up there and do the role on the Met stage for people who paid a great deal of money. I don't feel that confident about everyone I hear at NYIOP, but in that case, I very much did.
That's true. Yeah, but she could, in the sense that you don't have to give the tickets back. She could keep you from giving the tickets back.
Exactly.
This is true. Which is important, let's be honest. Now, a question. When you hear auditions, this is a question that Tamara from Salzburg, lovely, beautiful, very cold Salzburg, said, in an audition, what are the most important elements besides the singing that help you know if you can cast someone, that make an audition successful at your level?
Besides the singing, the most important thing to show me in an audition is you. I'm going to hire somebody, or in a contest, we're going to give somebody the prize. Give me a reason to make it you. It needs to be more expressive, more memorable. Now, that doesn't mean you dye your hair green memorable, but all of us who love opera have performances that we remember from years, dare I say, decades ago, that just stick with you because they are memorable. I need to see that you understand the character and that you express the drama through the music, not in between, because that's the art form.
When you listen, this is an interesting question. This is mine, but goes to what you said. When you hear someone sing an aria at the audition, do you end that commitment to the character and the character through your voice? Can you hear the difference between someone who is giving you the character as it falls within the opera, as opposed to simply a presentation of the aria?
I think that would be more applicable in a contest than a job audition. Now, nowadays, in the production, the character may not be what we always think of him as. But I need to be able to say to the director, yes, she will be able to give you that. It has to do with body language and energy more than actual moving around. To make a very obvious example, you can't sing the habanera as if you're singing "O Thou That Tellest Good Tidings to Zion." You have to show me Carmen. Now, maybe the director will want a meaner Carmen, an angrier Carmen, a dumber Carmen, whatever. But show me something so that I can say, yes, this person knows what they're doing.
And what is too much acting? Ruben just wrote it and we were in the same wavelength. What is too much acting?
I would say too much. The only thing that is too much acting is if the acting is bad. There can be too much. That's
schmacting, I believe they call that, yes.
there is no limit to the amount of acting. If you're doing the Wotan scene in Act 2, where all he does in terms of blocking is move the spear from one hand to the other, you've still got to be acting up a storm. I have to see that you are Wotan. Whether the director tells you to go left or right or turn or whatever, I have to see that you understand and can convey what Wotan is doing at that moment. There's a little offshoot there that I want to say. A lot of people will tell you, if you really understand what you're singing, it will come across. That isn't exactly true. There are people who understand what they're singing. The point is, do they make me understand what they're singing?
A very good point. Very good point.
It has to come out, and some people don't realize how little is coming across. They're thinking it right, but it isn't coming across.
Do you think there's a difference in that between, for example, somebody who's used to singing, I mean, forgive me, Tamara, you just wrote this, so I see Salzburg, but somebody who's got a career in the Landestheater in Salzburg, which seats moderately probably about 700 people, and the Met, do you think that...
That isn't what I'm talking about. That difference in size is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an honest expressivity, which a real performer has. There are people who know different languages and they may have beautiful voices, but they aren't performers. The idea is to make the audience cry, not to cry yourself.
Of course. So what you're saying is that if someone can embody that and has the expressivity to show that, then it's possible that they simply don't move at all during an audition and it will have the same effect. Whereas if somebody doesn't have that, they can climb around on the ground and kiss Johanna on imaginary head all they want and it's still going to fall flat.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a difference between stillness and stiffness. Stillness can be very powerful. Wonderful old clips of Fritz Wunderlich singing Lenski, I think in German, where he doesn't move at all and you can't take your eyes off him. Or Caballé singing Casta Diva. She doesn't move around, but she's fascinating, and I mean fascinating to watch, not just that the sound is good. To step back into a couple things, when we've covered this, just because I don't want to leave this because I know people will be interested. With the Met's periodic auditions that happen, you said, about a couple times a month now, what is the process for that? How do you submit yourself to be one of the people that's considered for those? Because I imagine that it's not something where you simply sit in a room and people wander in off the street to sing. So how does one submit themselves in the hopes of being selected to sing for one of those? You send in a resume and a photo and say that you would like to be heard for a screening audition. If I can see on the resume that all you've done is sing bar mitzvahs, then I'm going to say this person is not ready for a Met audition. If you are within the age limit, the best approach is through National Council. But if you want,
what is the age limit on that these days?
I think it's either 30 or 31, but you can go to the website and make sure. If the person has serious credentials, then we will very likely set up an audition. Now, if all the person has done is Bach cantatas, even if they've done 100 of them, it's unlikely that they're really going to, contribute anything at the Met. If you're a very young singer and all you've done is Bach cantatas, that might be intelligent, but then you should go through National Council.
Now, when you say if they've got serious credits, what would you consider a serious credit, like on the lower end of serious credit, just for reality's sake?
You sang the role in Stuttgart, or
leading role,
Chicago, or Seattle Ring, or something like that. You know, something that's in a large theater where I can ask the people that I know that work there how you did.
Very important. That's a recurring theme with these webinars. A very big recurring theme is the necessity or is the usefulness of people that we know knowing how to, basically being able to ask people back and forth. That's a very big key that everybody listening should pay attention to, because everyone has said it on every single webinar.
Yep.
But what you're saying is singing any role at one of the big as far as spatial big theaters, where you have access to ask them that this is what you would consider a serious credential.
Absolutely. Now, for a given role, it might be something else, but that is in general what I would take.
Now, and you personally, do you have any problems with singers, for example, a singer that has taken off some time? I know that I see resumes quite often with somebody, they will even list on the resume, took time off, had 2 children, and coming back as a career. Does that bother you?
You know, that it depends what they show me. If what they show me is that they're a little bit out of shape vocally, or that they're still doing repertoire they did 10 years ago and now shouldn't be, then yes, it's a problem. It's only the ramifications of the time out rather than actually the time out.
So if somebody takes 10 years off and comes back as strong as ever, then it doesn't bother you. Exactly. As long as they're realistic as they are now.
Yes.
Now,
for instance, somebody who used to sing, a tenor who used to sing Pinkerton, who for whatever reason, including having a baby, has not worked for 10 years, and comes in and says, I want to be considered for Goro, that's very sensible. May not work, but something like that, in terms of a time lag, that I can certainly see.
Now, here's another question. Is, for example, there is somebody who shall remain nameless, but you'll know probably, who was known in a very specific repertoire, Handel and Mozart at one point, who has now recently more or less re-emerged. She was never really off the scene, but re-emerged in things such as Electra. What is that process? Do you track that process with particular artists that have operated at a high level in one repertoire and slowly transition over a couple of years, somewhat in the shadows, to a completely different repertoire?
Well, yeah, I mean, that person would either have to come in and sing the new repertoire for us, or somebody who represents the Met would have to see that person in a performance wherever the new roles are being done. Agents will call us all the time and say, oh, you should hear him now. Oh, it's wonderful. Oh, this and that. It's all changed. Maybe yes, maybe no, you know.
So the Met actually does hear people on a regular basis as they're transitioning when they're interested in them.
Oh, yes. I think it's important for singers, especially young singers, to realize, because everybody hates auditions, but unless you are, if I may say, unless you are in the 1%, you're going to audition in some form all your career. Now, hopefully it won't be a cattle call always, but, you know, it can be that we're hearing you for a specific role. It can be a work session with the maestro. It can be the director wants to meet you, but it's an audition. And you have to be comfortable and aware of and in control of what you are showing us.
Mm-hmm. And so essentially, you can call people in, like for example, with the Met casting schedule, sometimes you're casting people for at least three, I'm sure, years, if not 4 or 5 years out sometimes. Do you ever call people in because along the way somebody from the Met has heard them in the interim and has doubts? Does that ever happen?
Absolutely, yes.
Wow. A question: if someone has sung for you, do you personally give feedback when people call and ask?
If they sing for me in a contest somewhere, and the contest is set up such that we give feedback, yes. But for a list hall screening audition, usually not. They have to realize that what they're doing is applying for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback essentially is, do you get the job or not?
I love that. Amen.
You know, when I was young, which admittedly is a while ago, and there were such things as secretaries, in order to get a job as a secretary, you had to take a typing test. Now, when you finish the typing test, the person in charge of the department didn't say, well, I think if you held your wrists a little higher, or maybe you should, do this or that. No, if you type 40 words a minute with 4 mistakes, they're going to hire the person who types 60 words a minute with no mistakes. That's it, If it's someone who has sung at the Met for years and comes in and says, I want to try this repertoire, and it's somebody I know, then I'll say, yes, I think that's a good idea. No, I think that's wrong. People who have been through National Council and come back to do an Ed Funds audition, education funds, those people we see more as in training. But if you're applying for a job, you just don't get feedback.
Which makes sense. I mean, I do have to also say, another thing to pass on is that during the couple years that we were collecting written feedback from people from the theaters, which you know very well from several times, we stopped doing it, like I told some people that were on earlier webinars, because more often than not, what I found is those people that had the biggest effect and got the job, there was not a word written of feedback on the labels, and almost 100% of the time on the rest of them, it was like unbridled nastiness from people, and I just thought, well, that's not helping anyone. Yet, I do have to say, in your defense, you were one of the few people that actually wrote constructive comments to people because you know what it is to tell someone this could be made better, or you were realistic, like we said, realistic and honest, where you would say this is just not going to happen. But we're honest. So I agree with you that feedback comes in the forms of contracts, and other than that, what are you expecting? I say often casting people are not coaches or teachers. They cast. Simple as that. A question: if you hear a singer that you think might have something, but you're not completely convinced, do you hear them again? Or do you say, okay, for 2 years I'm not going to listen to them, but then maybe? Or sometimes, I mean, if there's something there of some sort, do you say you'll hear them again, or do you put down the curtain and that's it?
No, I will often hear someone again. I will say to the person or say to the agent, come back in not less than a year, or not less than 2 years. Or if I know that the person is going off to be fest somewhere, I'll say, come back after that and let's see. It depends what my questions are, what blanks they've left for me.
When you say that to an agent, you will usually fill in the blanks as to what your question is.
if I think the agent will understand, yes.
Which brings us to the next question: is what is the role of agents? How much weight does this agent over that agent or level of agent that comes to you have in your decision making as to whether you hear someone?
For the people that I'm hearing who are not the stars, they are not the Anna Netrebkos and Jonas Kaufmann. What an agent needs to be able to do is get you auditions. You get yourself the job. Now, I think most agents deal slightly differently with the Met than they do with other theaters. So it may be that for a smaller theater, a particular agent will have more or less influence on the people who are casting. Or, for example, the regional houses in the United States who aren't in New York every week hearing auditions, they may take an agent's word more quickly than I would. But mostly it's a matter of the agent convincing me to hear the person, and then it's up to the singer. At the higher level, it's about money and time and recordings and that kind of stuff. But this is just entry level.
But there's very few. But for example, you sit in on all of the auditions that happen on the stage as much as you're in town, correct?
Yes.
And so, I mean, my impression is that Anna Netrebko and Jonas Kaufmann and all of these, at some point they came across a stage audition, but the stars generally work in a different way than even people that one discovers for a major role, correct?
Yes. Yes.
But you personally know agent, like for example, Alan Green doesn't call you and therefore somebody gets cast simply because he's called you. They can get you in the door, an agent, no matter who it is. Alan Green called me. That essentially the no agent necessarily holds sway over you, or do you have different perception of a singer based on what letterhead is on their resume?
I will say this. There are certain agents who, over a period of years, have shown me interesting singers, and there are certain agents who, over a period of years, have unfailingly showed me not interesting singers.
We'll post that list on the website.
I am not going to preclude the possibility of hearing someone on that agent's list, but I'm not going to make it a priority. Whereas the people,
but that's experience. That's personal experience. Makes sense.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Over years, if somebody has generally, to me, that would be as simple as they understand what you need and they tend to give you what you need. Therefore, you would make priority for those singers because chances are you will cast more from that.
I will not be wasting my time.
So then, to switch to another thing before we start to a little bit bring it down to a close. We've got about 10 minutes left. Another of the things that we put so much of our focus on the Met. You also cast for the Spoleto Festival here in the U.S. What is the difference? What you look for Spoleto over the Met?
Well, there are several venues in Spoleto where we do operas, but none of them is as big as the Met. The biggest theater in Charleston is about 2,000 seats. The smallest is 500 seats. Obviously, I'm looking for something different than I would for the same role at the Met. Also, the biggest difference is the money. Spoleto, like a lot of summer festivals, pays very little. So I'm looking for people who want to try out a role or like to play golf, so they want to be in Charleston or whatever, rather than people who are, at the point where they will do it if you pay them enough. We're just not going to get those people.
Yeah.
Also, at Spoleto, how should I say? At the Met, we have floors of people who deal with difficult artists. In Spoleto, we don't. So the kind of diva temperament or showing up without your role learned, those things are more crucial factors, oddly enough, in Spoleto because there are no covers and they just don't have the means to deal with it. Whereas at the Met, we don't particularly deliberately go for difficult people, but sometimes it's worth it, and then you just have to deal with the person.
Do you ever use Charleston as a way to test out an artist that you might want to use or recommend to the Met afterwards?
Not intentionally. It has worked out that way, but not intentionally.
And how does one go about it? Do you hear auditions for Spoleto, or is it something that you hear enough singers that they're kind of always auditioning for Spoleto too?
There is some of that. Of late, for Spoleto, we've been trying to have the director or the conductor or both of the particular piece hear certain singers that I have culled through from agent submissions. We do a sufficient amount of new or obscure repertoire in Spoleto that we are looking for very particular singers, but only one
particular type. Yeah.
Yeah. I need a tenor, but it's more important that he can count than that he has a great C,
Well, that narrows the field quite a bit now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But only one season ahead, you said as well, right?
Right.
And do you ever hear, you've mentioned several times with this, that managed singers, you talk to an agent, do you ever hear unmanaged singers in general?
Unmanaged or unmanageable? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But again, if it's somebody who has only minimal credentials, it would depend. I'd have to look at the resume. But part of what complicates things is that nowadays there is no safe place to try out a role. It used to be that St. Louis and Santa Fe, or going back further, the Goldovsky Tour or the Texas Opera Theater Tour, were safe places to try out a role. But now, everyone in the business goes to St. Louis. Everyone in the business goes to Santa Fe. Everything is on YouTube immediately. It becomes harder and harder for the singer to do something where they can make mistakes, where they can fail, because it becomes known too quickly, rather than a place where nobody sees you and you just say to yourself, well, that was no good, I'll do something else.
So two last things, and then we're going to have to wrap things up. But one is, these are the two things, and address them in the order that you wish. I want to know if there are any today that you would give as examples of that balance between singing at the right level and emoting that one can search, for example, on YouTube and see to get an idea of what is a good balance that you were talking about. And the other would be, I want to know from you the YouTube thing, what you think about the fact that a lot of people what it is. Do you check YouTube when you hear about an artist's name? How much does it affect you? How much does it not? So, in those two things.
Okay, taking the second one first. Of course, I will go to YouTube if I hear about a singer. An agent will say to me, "You should hear this guy when he's in town. Connect to this link for YouTube." I will never hire someone only from YouTube. I have to hear them live, or someone else in the Met has to hear them live. What I mostly use YouTube for is, to go back and see the clip of the Bingala with Vickers and Reasonek that just, makes me happy.
Unbelievable.
But yes, I will look at somebody on YouTube. It gives me an idea of their size and how they move and how expressive they are, more than what I can get from a photo. And the other was, who do I think is a good example of somebody who combines the singing and the emoting?
Yeah, let's say today, for people that potentially you could see on stage as well as online.
Well, I am a big fan of Piotr Beczala, who reminds me of Gedda in his singing. And he's very expressive, and he's a good actor. He moves well. There's a reason that he's working as much as he is.
Yeah.
I think he has the best equalization of the gifts. I adore Bryn Terfel. I think he's always a fascinating performer. Sometimes he sings better than other times. But in particular roles, I would certainly be interested in watching.
Now, what about females of the past? Who had the best balance historically?
Well, Anna Moffo was a pleasure both to listen to and to look at. Her good singing days didn't last as long as they should have, but if you look at some of the early clips, it's amazing. Shirley Verrett. Look at the clip of her singing Lady Macbeth. It's hair-raising.
Cool.
And then there are people. I mean, I'm glad to watch Sutherland or Caballé, although I acknowledge that the balance is slightly tilted in their cases.
Yeah.
For the men, I'm always.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
For the men, I'm happy and interested to see a clip of Corelli or a clip of Vickers or Wunderlich or Björling. He was not such a great actor. I don't know where along the way it became impossible to find somebody who sang that well and was that expressive.
It is true. This is the big key. Listen, the one thing I do want to go back to quickly, and then we will go to the dessert because we'll have to sign off in just a second, is that you said you will never hire off of YouTube, but what seemed to me to be a little bit of kind of a silent implication was the fact that you will choose not to hear someone if the YouTubes don't sound good. Is that true?
No, I wouldn't say that's true. it depends on a lot of things. I may be looking for a role that's different than what the clip on YouTube is. The clip on YouTube might be 2 years old. Any number of things. And so I would not say that. But there are people that I hear on YouTube where I say, well, I'm not in any rush to hear them live.
I see.
I wouldn't say that it would kill them, no.
Okay. Now listen, for our last thing, is those of you that have been joining us for the past it's almost 2 months now. Time has flown. I warned Lenore a little ahead of time about this, but not the details in there, is that I have essentially bootlegged the questionnaire that James Lipton does on the Inside the Actor Studio that comes on A&E, and turned it into an opera questionnaire, which I always find very fascinating, to just get some answers from some people and to see how they answer these questions. So there's just 8 questions. It goes rather simply. But before that, the last thing I do want to say is that please, next week, on the 1st of December, joined by Kathy Olson, who Lenore knows very well, who will be talking. She's kind of become a specialist in crossover and film TV work. She is a wonderful opera coach. She is an agent who owns a company called Encompass Arts. But she was also the casting director of the La Boheme on Broadway with Baz Luhrmann. And she has developed a specialty in knowing how to help opera singers transition into crossover things, and meaning not just Broadway but pop work, as well as TV and film. She works for Anthony LaCura, who most of you know was one of the very best character tenors that America has ever created, who is now on the Emmy-winning Boardwalk Empire on HBO as Steve Buscemi's butler. And she's going to join us next week on the 1st of December. All of that information's online. If this has been good for you today, then please Facebook it and tweet it and everything else so people know about it, because really the point of these webinars is to pass information to the industry, information that you don't get in conservatories and you're not going to get from your coach and your teacher ever. You're going to get that pretty much only here right now. If there are people that are interested in singing in these NYIOP auditions coming up on 6th and 7th, are the first round auditions, and as of right now there's only 14 spaces left. I don't know, there's a wonderful list of theaters that are going to be there. All of that is online too. You can write me if you have questions. So let's get to the fun stuff. Lenore, what is your favorite opera?
At the moment, I would say Don Carlo.
That's a good one.
But, if I'm listening to a great Otello, I'm not going to say that it's any lesser. It would be Verdi. It would be something Verdi.
We can't beat it. Now, what is your least favorite opera?
Haroun and the Sea of Stories, which I saw at City Opera, which was
me too.
My life I will never get back.
Yeah, it was great costumes, but what turns you on about opera? What do you love about opera?
I love the emotion, the expression of emotion in the music itself. I am crazy about beautiful productions, and I certainly like to look at nice-looking people, but when the human voice, coupled with brilliant composition, gets you going, there's nothing else like it.
And what turns you off about opera?
People singing flat.
Which you hear more and more. Mm. Now, what character, in all of opera, what character would you most like to be as a person?
The one I would most like to be is Zerbinetta. The one I most like is Auditioning.
Ah.
And therein lies years of psychotherapy. So.
Well, we're an opera, so we're all rich. What character in opera would you least like to be?
Probably Kundry.
She is a little angry.
Anger issues, yeah.
Yeah. There's more of that therapy needed. Now, what profession other than the one you have would you like to do?
Well, there was a time when I really wanted to be an interpreter at the UN. But somebody said to me, well, you know, jobs in translation are very few and pay very badly. And I said, oh, well, then I'll go into music. So
that worked out. And now, our last question. If heaven exists, which character from which opera do you want God to be when you arrive?
Do I want God to be?
Yes.
That's hard. I almost said Zoroaster, but he's such a misogynist. I don't suppose that would be good. I don't know what other people said.
Well, let's see. There has been everything from, there has been, some people have said, what did they say? I have to think for just a moment. There has been Figaro mentioned. There has actually been Otello once. Somebody, one of the young agents said the Duca, I believe. So, which tells us a whole lot about him.
Yeah.
So, personally, I would say I think Susanna, because I think she's just downright lovely. But
you want her to be God? Okay.
She's always thinking and never taking anything too seriously. And I kind of need that when I'm showing up.
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. Can't hear you. You're gone. Bye. Can't hear you. Well, if you can hear me, then I would say this is difficult business, and you're going to hear no a lot, and it's okay to be disappointed, but it is not okay to be discouraged. You have to get up and try again and try again. I wish you all good health and the best of luck.